Welcome back, and Gordon Smith. Just out of curiosity, for those people in the audience, how many of you are writers? Wow. Excellent. How many are directors? And producers? Actors? And civilians? Great. So what I'd like to do is just kind of do like a broad talk about Gordon and his origin story. Then we'll talk about Breaking Bad and Better Call Saul, and then we'll talk about the episode. And then we'll open the floor for questions in the last 15 minutes or so.
Also, I have to say, I'm really happy to be in Canada where Gordon isn't quite as weird a name as it is in the States. And people are like, yeah, Gordon, sure, fine.
National hero.
No, I mean, there's several.
Yeah, that's true. Gordon Lightfoot as well. I'm going to set my timer for 45 minutes. There we go. Okay, so let's talk about your origin story. Coming into writing, did you go to film school? How did you start out?
Yeah, I did. I went to University of Michigan for undergrad, and then I did a lot of stupid things that didn't go anywhere, and then I went to USC for film school, and shortly after that, I got a job as a office PA on Breaking Bad.
Yeah.
A friend of mine from film school knew the writer's assistant on Breaking Bad, and they had an opening, and I was lucky enough to get my resume in and worked my way up from PA to, the hope was going to be that there would be an opening basically in as Vince Gilligan's assistant, season 4, so that was season 3, and then that came true, so I was Vince's assistant season 4, and then writer's assistant season 5/6, or however you want to call it, for Breaking Bad.
And in film school, did you study writing? What were you studying in film school?
I was a they had a major that's sort of production, which gave you, it was for people that wanted to do everything from sound design to directing to writing. So it was a nice, which is great because it gives you opportunities to sort of, you had to do production work. So sometimes when you're writing, you're just like, nah, this happens, but you had to actually sit with those decisions in production, which I thought was really important. So I did a lot of editorial, and I did a lot of writing, basically.
And then coming into Breaking Bad, shifting from being PA to being Vince's assistant, how did that come about? Was it a sample that you showed him, or just like an opening?
No, I mean, that was sort of the hope. Like my being a PA was sort of, the hope was that Jenny Hutchison, who was then the writer's assistant, that was season 3 was the season she got her freelance. So hopefully she was going to get staffed, and then everyone was going to move up. So basically I had a season of, being a PA, trying to make an impression, and not screw it up enough that Vince would trust me to be his assistant in season 4, which, hopefully I didn't screw it up enough, and then he took me as his assistant. He looked at a sample of mine between season 4 and season 5. After season 4, when I'd been his assistant for a year, he's like, hey, I'd be willing to read something that you'd written. And I had things, but I didn't have the thing that I wanted to show him, so I had to write it during hiatus and get it to him so that he could look at it and kind of know. But he liked it, and then he was willing to sort of staff me straight on Saul as a result.
But also on Breaking Bad, you were doing some additional writing for the show.
Yes. I wrote a lot of like anything that wasn't, pretty much anything that wasn't an episode, I had fingerprints on. I wrote for the website. I wrote webisodes. I wrote things like if you've read descriptions of Breaking Bad on cable, I probably wrote those. I wrote just virtually anything that they gave me a chance to try to write, press releases, those kinds of things. So I'd had a chance, at least in that regard, to write comic books, games, whatever I could, whatever they were willing to let me try.
And were you pitching stuff to them as well?
I was pitching some stuff. I was pitching things like, especially for games and whatnot, it was more a process of like, hey, I think this would be good. What do you guys think? And as long as it fell within a range, because it was it was non-canon, as it were, they were fairly open to it. Probably the most not invasive, but the most like intense note process was when Jen Carroll and I were pitching they wanted to do a scene for that was specifically for the DVD, and that would have fit very precisely, exactly within the Breaking Bad timeline with Saul and with Jesse, and we had to be like, okay, this is what we'd like to do, and then we had a couple of sessions with Vince where he was just like, okay, I like this, but what about this? How do we shift this so that it fits exactly with the characters? And it was just like it was a miniature writer's room with the three of us basically sitting in the bullpen and just going through it. So. And
audition sides, were you writing those as well?
I was doing a lot of audition sides. We started getting, I don't want to say paranoid, but there's a lot of, not leaks, but there was stuff coming from casting, because you have to put out, hey, we're looking for this. And then people would pick up the fact that it's like, oh, Breaking Bad's looking for this. Great, so now we know this thing that we're describing exists in the new season. So when we started noting that, we were like, okay, well, we need to do something to combat that. And one of the ways that we did that was we started taking characters that we knew we needed and coming up with ways to describe them but not describe them. Basically come up with ways, like for Lydia in season 5, who's like, the corporate Madrigal executive.
With the NutraSweet.
Yes,
yeah.
Yes, with her stevia and stuff, and her tea. So I believe that scene was like her commissioning somebody to do an art robbery of a piece of art that she owned. So basically commissioning someone to rob her house, which is clearly, it was based on the scene that she meets Mike in the diner and is asking him to kill a bunch of guys in jail. And Jesse Plemons' first scene, Todd, the character of Todd, we needed to write that scene, which was the scene where he's defending himself against having shot the kid after the train robbery. Obviously, there's reasons why we didn't want these things to be kind of out there, so that one was like, it was him in, I think it was Afghanistan, having sort of been somebody who was a little bit, had initiated a firefight when he shouldn't have, essentially, and defending himself against his superiors. So it was completely different context, it was completely different scenarios, but the shape of the scenes was supposed to be the same, right, so that people could kind of read it and go, so that when we watched the tapes, we could be like, oh, okay, they're doing some of this stuff, and they did. So the people that got it kind of got it. So.
Right. The thing that I love about your origin story and how you came into being an Emmy-nominated writer on Better Call Saul is, I know in certain interviews you talk about being lucky. And
so lucky, crazy lucky.
But at the same time, I think a lot of what you have had is tenacity, and that you have studied and you've been prepared, and so that when a door opens itself, you were ready for these things, and you had a sample ready for Vince Gilligan, and so the luck comes in knowing Jenny Hutchinson, who was able to get you on the show,
yes,
and then having a showrunner who was generous enough to take you on. but that you were also hardworking and tenacious, and you saw the thing that you wanted, and there's, you know, the writer's room ladder, but you also went into the trench to dig yourself towards that ladder.
I did do that, yes.
Yes.
I mean, I think, you know, I think a lot of people when they're sort of like trying to start out, they're like, oh, how do I get foot in the door? How do I get going? How do I get, you know, a career going? And sometimes they mean, how do I get where you are without having done that? Like,
Yes.
no, but really, how do I just get my sample read so that somebody realizes that I'm brilliant? And it's like, you may be brilliant, but, you know, I got it's my sample that I wrote. So Vince asked me to, like, oh, I'd be willing to read you. And I had something that I'd broken, but I hadn't written it yet. So I wrote it, and he liked it. But nothing happened because it was the end of Breaking Bad, and there was no room. Like, there was all of those people, all of the scripts for the remainder of the time were spoken for. But his agent was like, because after years of working with his agent, was like, oh, I'd be willing to read you too. And so I was able to send that to him, and he liked it too. So that was sort of somebody who likes you is going to read your stuff a little bit more generously and be more interested and more invested in you. And that's all about putting in that legwork. So, you know, I certainly had the opportunity to do a lot of stupid things that kind of screwed up my life and take a lot of blind alleys. But it's continuing trying to be like, all right, well, this is what I want. So I'm willing to start as a PA and willing to do that stuff, which I think gives you a good vantage point. It gives you a good perspective to be like, hey, I want this, and not only do I want this, but I'm willing to learn while I'm here what I can learn. It's a great place, actually. I really like being like starting there because you can be like, all right, no one gives a crap what I'm doing except if their lunch is here on time. I got their lunch here on time. Yes, but I can watch what they're doing and I can listen. I can be a fly on the wall in a way that you won't be when people are like looking at you and going, oh, what are you pitching?
Right. I mean, I've had PAs who are writers who have never also approached me and said, but also in Canada, we don't really have the budgets for writers' assistants. But that the balls to like go to Vince Gilligan and say, you know, would you be willing to take me on as your writer's assistant? That is also kudos to you. Yeah.
Thank you. Again, just luck. That's again, there's a series of things where I'm just like, I got very lucky and have been, you know, sort of clinging to a bucking bronco that sort of at any point could throw me off, and I'm trying hard not to let it.
But also in coming in through production, and I don't know if part of what you were doing as PA was, are you guys familiar with sides? Those are tomorrow's scripts that are photocopied down to a certain size, or for blind people like me, to 8.5 by 11. And so those are sort of photocopied, ready for cast and crew to have the next day. Was that part of what you were doing?
I was specifically in the
but you were exposed
to
the scripts.
Yes, I was definitely exposed. I was absolutely exposed to the scripts.
How many of you guys have read a Breaking Bad or a Better Call Saul script? If you would like to read this script, it's available on the Emmys website, as are all the Emmy-nominated scripts every year, and I highly recommend for anyone in the industry, or even just if you're looking for a great read, to read Gordon's script, because there is a personality to these scripts that is conveyed on the screen, but also they're incredibly fun reads. In the action sections of the script, that's where writers kind of show off to each other. And Better Call Saul and Breaking Bad scripts are phenomenal in that respect.
Well, thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. I think it's because of the showrunners, because Vince and Peter on the show are very engaged in it. And I think it serves a function for us, especially because our writing in post is in Burbank, California, and or we shoot in Albuquerque. And so we're always wanting to make sure that, when production gets a hold of the script, that they're like, okay, what's the tone here? What's the moment? Like, what does it feel like? Because we have our tone meetings and everything, but that only goes to the director and the producers and so forth. That doesn't necessarily make it out to everybody that's reading it. And so we want to be invested so that, like, if anybody picks up the script, they're like, okay, this is how I should be feeling. This is what the mood is. This is what the feeling is, and that's why we end up doing that, I think, a lot.
Yeah, they're amazing. And so for a tone meeting, for those of you who don't know or haven't been in one, that's where the writers and the showrunner sit down with the director and they do a page turn on the script, and you talk about scene by scene the moments and
Yeah.
for the writers, what are the most important emotional beats to hit. And then also, if you get in the weeds, what's the stuff that...
Yeah,
Yeah.
where is this going? What are problems, especially if it's like a new director or something like that? Not that I've had that experience, but it's the experience of like, okay, well, these actors may have certain tendencies, and so you want to be able to be like, oh, here's what we know about this story, about these characters, about these actors, about anything that you can give people to work from. So.
Right. In Canada, we've had Moira Wally-Beckett come through and show us the cards from Breaking Bad and the intense, which I would call Breaking Good, like some kind of Hillary Rodham Clinton. 2 weeks into breaking an episode of Breaking Bad, and so in Better Call Saul, how intense, and then with the card situation.
We've had some card creep, which just means that, like, we get more detailed with the cards than them. There's a lot of detail that goes into the cards. The carding, basically, we on both shows, actually all the shows that I've worked on, carding means sort of, it's breaking the episode. Some people work on whiteboards, so you just like, oh, I'm going to write this idea for this scene, and then you erase it if you change your mind, and you work on whiteboards. We tend to work on cards, so 3x5 cards where you write down what the scenes are and what the beats are. That can be as abstract as, a scene where this happens and it's one card, and that scene would actually take 5 minutes of screen time. Or it could be more detailed. We've gotten a little bit more detailed as time has gone on both shows, just to be like, it's the first step of the writing process. So we sit in a room for however many days or weeks to kind of figure out what's happening, and then comes the kind of point of writing it down on cards, and then the cards go up, and that's the structure, and then an outline comes out of that. I think the more detail that goes into the cards, it's like, okay, look, we're anticipating where things could go, not wrong, but like where we want to remember key details. It's like having a tone meeting, but it's like a tone meeting written down in card form.
But you'll start with general season stuff, and where you want to go towards, or is it like, we're going to start here and then let's see where the season takes us?
Yeah, honestly, it's not as season oriented as as I think might be more common. We will definitely do a few weeks of like season work and be like, okay, well, what could we do? Like, where did we end, and where are people? Where are the characters? Like, what are they going through at this particular moment? And we'll sketch out some stuff, and we'll come up with things, and we'll put them up on a board that just has the episode numbers and go from it. But it's rare that we're kind of hitting those points. Sometimes, but it's pretty rare that we're hitting those. More often, we'll be like, okay, we finished that episode. What happens next? We liked this idea. Does it still work? Maybe. Well, let's talk about it. Let's really sort of figure out does it work? And if it doesn't, then we throw it out or we move it. We had so there are a lot of things. They still kind of, those things that we do in the sort of season arcs, I feel like still make they still leave their fingerprints on what actually ends up there. We had this thing for Breaking Bad season 5 that we had up for forever, from the sort of like early breaking. At the end of, in episode 508, we had thought that Hank would figure out, again, spoilers, sorry, it's already aired like years ago now. So we had this idea that Hank was going to find out about Walt, and that he would confront, like in the moment that Skylar was going to be there, and say something like, hey, you know, he was going to say, do you know that this is what's going on? And she was going to stand by Walt to a degree and say something like, well, if this is, you know, if you think that's what's going on here, then take your best shot. Like, and that was going to be kind of the out of that half season of season 5. And we talked through it, and we kept kind of like, but as we were working through the steps getting there, it was like, there was no way to get to that point. And even though we didn't, and it never made sense for her, it just didn't it didn't respect the character enough. There's pieces of it. There's a little bit of a feeling of that, because she does end up kind of standing by Walt in the second half of that season once she finds out that Hank knows, and so on and so forth. So I think some of those things get dissolved into the DNA of things, but they're not. We're not kind of adhering to them.
And so coming from Breaking Bad into Better Call Saul, and so much of the family carrying across the two shows, is there a difference between the two shows?
Yeah, I think there's a difference. I mean, both tonally, obviously, there's a difference, because we're much more. We're able to be a little bit more lighthearted.
Right, except
as you can see in this episode,
fun and games.
That's right. It's just jokes galore. But we are able to be more lighthearted, because so much of it focuses on Jimmy, or Jimmy/Saul/ Bob Odenkirk, who's a comic genius, and so we are able to kind of have that tone. And I think actually because of that too, because we kind of know, I think because we know where the characters are going, you know, sometimes people are like, oh, well, you know, the stakes are so much lower. And, you know, we know he's not gonna die. And I kind of go, well, yeah, I don't think death is the only thing that matters, you know? I don't think death is the only stakes, either in life or in drama. And in a certain way, the fact that he's not going to die allows us the liberty to sort of ask the question about, like, what's the state of his life, of his soul, of his heart, of where he is morally. What is he, a good guy? I don't know. Is he a bad guy? Is he shifting? So I think that is slightly different, because, you know, Walt's journey did feel life and death, even though to an extent it's very similar too, because it's like, you kind of know Walt's not going to die in episode 3 of Breaking Bad, and then just spin off into some show about Skylar or something. It's probably going to live for most, if not all, of the show. But in a way, because he's a dead man walking, it feels like it's always a constant existential threat. So I don't know. I feel like there's a difference. There's a slightly different tone to the shows. Procedure-wise, in terms of making it, I think we work as close as we can to the same model. Like a tick, we're dug in. We're just like we're attached to Albuquerque, which I think lends a lot to the show, to both shows, because it's a specific place, and we try as much as possible to sort of feature that so that it feels like it's a specific place, and we're not shooting Albuquerque for any town. We're shooting Albuquerque for Albuquerque, which hopefully it feels that way, and it gives that sense to it.
Was there, in early talks about season 1, a discussion about giving Mike a dedicated episode? and delving into that backstory. So when we meet Mike at the top of season 1, it's almost like doing penance in his booth in the parking lot. And so there's this question of like, how do you get from the sort of, methodical hitman of Breaking Bad to this guy? So that's my question is, was there a plan for Mike of, let's just give Mike an episode?
Not exactly. We started kind of asking a lot of questions about him because we're like, all right, we know we have him. We know we have the actor Jonathan Banks, who's great, and we want to like use him as much as possible because we felt even more than we knew he's got to be integral to Jimmy's story and to becoming Saul and all of that. And so we're like, okay, we've got this guy, we've got this character. Okay, cool. What do we do with that? And so we started generating ideas about it, and we would brainstorm some things. Jonathan Banks had years before thought, okay, this story, this person, this character that I'm playing, it's got to have something to do with my son, because he just knew from the brief interaction we'd seen with his daughter-in-law, he's like, or with the woman there that was his granddaughter's mother. He's like, that's not my daughter, that's my daughter-in-law, because the way they interacted, it's just, he just was 100% certain about it. And so he's like, and I think, and his pitch was that his son had been a boxer who was killed in the ring, and that had somehow made him feel something. So that was, Jonathan brought that forward as his sort of, the backstory that he was working from. And we were like, okay, that's interesting. What do we do with it? We played around with it, and we boarded out all of these things. We boarded out like tons of sequences that didn't make it. Because we were like, okay, once we started getting into the depths of what became this episode, we were like, okay, well, we need to know, how did Mike find out that these guys killed his son? Okay, well, he would have gone to the place where it happened, and he would have done this kind of investigation work, because he wasn't just going to go on supposition. Okay, great. So we had that sequence up, and then we're like, okay, so how did they kill him? Okay, well, they would have done this because they were smart and they tricked him into this kind of situation. Okay, great. So we had that boarded out. So we had just all this stuff, this material, and we weren't sure when it was going to land, and then it suddenly sort of was like taking. It kind of became clear it was going to be this episode, which we actually broke as the 5th episode of the season, and then it moved because when we started kind of going on after it, we're like, well, there's some stuff with Jimmy that we needed to do, which became episode 5. So we didn't know it was going to be a dedicated episode, but when we started thinking, are we going to do this in bits and pieces, or are we going to try and just get through it, or how is it going to shape up? Are we going to split it into 2 episodes or whatever? It kind of felt like it all held together. There was a sort of gravity to it that just was like, all right, this is what we're doing.
So then you see, because at the top of every season, writers are contracted for X number of episodes, and you kind of know where you're going to shake out in the pecking order. Mm-hmm. So as you see this pushing towards Gordon Smith, who's going to write number 6, mm-hmm. How do you feel?
Nauseous, really. Honestly, it sounds, I don't know, maybe disingenuous, but like there was just a lot of pressure, because it's literally my first chance to be like, hey, you guys took a risk. I hadn't written anything before. You didn't staff me based on me being a sort of established writer. You staffed me based on the fact that like I know where the bodies are buried, and so you kind of can't get rid of me. And so you like me. You've invested in me, and you think you've seen enough things that you're like, maybe you're okay. But like, I'm like, okay, I just want to show you that I can do this thing, and you're giving me something that's like, it's a piece of a story that everyone was going to be concerned about. Everyone was going to be like focusing on and interested in. So I'm like, okay. There was a lot of opportunity to like not necessarily fail because the material that we generated in the room was really good, but like not live up to it and not or just kind of turn in something that was like, oh yeah, that's okay, and then somebody else, then the showrunners take it and they polish it and they made it and they make it good. But so I was worried about that, but I was happy about the sort of final result. It was I think they were too. So.
And so of that, what was the plane that was most terrifying to land? Was it the soliloquy?
Monologue, yeah, obviously. Yeah, absolutely. It was like, okay, because the other stuff is, there's the shootout and so forth. That some parts I'm like, okay, this is going to be, we're going to have an idea and it's going to be here, but we'll probably need to just have more discussions as we're kind of going through the drafts, and that's fine. But like the soliloquy, it was like, okay, this is the most we've gotten into this character's head. This is the most we've really heard him talk. He just doesn't. He's not a talker. He's not a guy who's going to be like, all right, let's sit down and have a chat. It's not really there. So, it was that was kind of hard because we knew going into it when we were just pitching it out. It's like, he's got to talk a lot because this is his baring his throat to his daughter-in-law and being like, look, I'm either going to lose my family entirely, and possibly if I don't have her on my side, possibly that's going to snowball into these cops knowing that I'm guilty. So I have to come clean. And so he had to talk, but he doesn't like to talk. So it was finding that balance of like, how much is too much, how much is not enough.
I was blown away by it when I watched it, and then I watched it again and again, and he's so emotive. I mean, I hope I'm not spoiling anything for Breaking Bad, but like when he dies in Breaking Bad,
Spoil.
There's
Suck
he
it.
just is so calm. Like he's a chill customer while that's happening. And this is the most emotion that we've seen out of him. Were you on set for this?
Yes.
How did that feel?
It was great. It was great. I mean, the director, Adam Bernstein, has directed like the most, aside from Michelle McLaren, who was one of our EPs, Adam directed the most episodes of Breaking Bad, and he's directed a ton of things that you've seen. Fargo, he directed the pilot of Fargo, and he's a super pro, and he's fantastic to work with. So it was just like, when we were doing it and we'd worked through it and we set the scene, and the blocking is really simple. It's basically one cross and the two of them sitting there. But we did it, and it was really late at night. And Albuquerque, despite what you see in Breaking Bad and Better Call Saul, has weather. We get rain and snow and ice and cold and so on and so forth. So it had been raining, and we'd had to like do all this stuff, but we were there and we were like really ready to move forward into the scene. And we did it a few times. Usually a lot of people, not everybody, but a lot of people sort of do when they're doing their coverage. They'll start with the master, which is kind of getting as many people or as much of the action as you can into the shot. So it's usually wider. So we did kind of the wides, and then we were working into the coverage, and we were like getting into kind of, all right, Jonathan, this is you, this is it. And we did that take, and it was like, there was kind of a quiet afterwards, and the crew started applauding. And it was that moment, because you're like, that was it. Like, wait, what else are we gonna do? Like, it was the kind of thing where you're like, all right, we're moving on, we're done. But
so it was one take in the.
I think we did two.
Yeah.
I think we did two on the kind of like medium close, kind of chest up.
It's hard for actors. Like, you don't want to burn them out.
No, because he'd been doing it. He'd been doing it in The Master, and he did it in in her coverage, and he did it in a couple of other angles. There are other angles in there, but it was like there was just the sort of one fairly close shot, and it was like, if that's not it, then we have more fundamental problems with this, because Jonathan just left everything he could there. He had sort of tapped into what he could, and so we kind of knew it. We're like, okay, great, we can move on.
And this is also the episode that he was nominated for.
Yes,
Yeah.
I think it was his.
Deservedly
I'm
so.
pretty sure it was his
Yeah.
submission for that season.
Yeah. One of the other things in this episode that I want to give you props for is the information that happens in the exchange between our two Philly cops and with Saul in the room, that because Saul is, or Jimmy at this point, because he is new to this whole story, that you were able to cover off a whole bunch of exposition without it feeling like exposition.
Thank you.
Very masterfully done.
That was a lot of work in the room for us to figure out, because it's that, because it is exposition. There's a lot of exposition in this episode, and so we had to kind of keep asking ourselves, because it's like, I don't know if you guys have read this. If you haven't, you should. There's a letter that David Mamet wrote to the writers of the unit, which is fantastic. It's just this like drama primer 101, and one of them is just like, people come into a scene and they want something, and that's the difference between like, oh, people are coming into the scene and they're just telling the audience things they need to know. And so we were like, oh, well, there were a lot of this when we were sort of crafting it. We're sort of like, oh, well, this is just people telling people things that they either should know or that the audience knows. And so we like, well, if we had Jimmy here, Jimmy doesn't know. Jimmy doesn't know these things, and so we could figure out a way that people are trying to position. Everyone's trying to position somebody for something that they want to know. So that was the thing that kind of cracked for us, to be like, okay, great, okay, we can do this scene. This is fine.
And he has to make a decision in that scene, too.
Exactly.
Like a decision that's paramount to the rest of the episode.
Right. That was a big moment for us, is to know beforehand that he had a task. So we don't know if he's going to do it going in. We don't know if he's going to spill the coffee. Which, yeah, exactly. Those little pieces of sort of like drama craft that we didn't know going in, because we kind of knew the information going in, because the information was like the first thing that we worked out was like, okay, well, here's what they know, here's what he knows, here's what they're saying. But it was those things that were like, oh, thank God we have Jimmy to play with here. He's not in the episode a lot, but he's crucial to sort of making it something that doesn't just sort of entail a bunch of people sitting in rooms telling each other things.
And if you get a chance to watch this again, and it's on Netflix and Xiaomi and a bunch of places, or read the script, what you may have been watching during that scene was Mike and the cop that he's talking to. But if you get a chance to watch it again, watch Jimmy and the cop who's putting the notepad into his jacket pocket, because that's where the decision is being made, where the cop who's putting the notepad into his pocket is watching Mike and making a decision about Mike's culpability in the murder of those other two Philly cops. And Jimmy is watching him watch Mike. And it's a really interesting kind of interaction in that room. But there's another conversation that is happening. So, like, just watch it again. It's really beautifully done.
And that actor is great. Omid Abtaya, I believe. He's fantastic. He was on Damien recently, and he's very subtle, but he's super keyed in, and he does just very small adjustments here and there. You're like, this kid is gonna tear him apart. So yeah, they're great. They're great people.
In the breaking of the episode and in the shooting of the episode, was there a discussion around a treatment of flashback versus present day?
Oh, like the color?
Yeah.
Yes. There was, because we were like, well, we don't want people to be confused, and we don't want people to be, we had done.
Because you have 3 timelines in this episode.
Yes.
Yeah.
We do. Mostly when we're doing flashbacks, we do a kind of, it's not actually bleach bypass anymore, but it's, fake bleach bypass, whatever computers do to simulate bleach bypass. which is just, if you guys don't know, so it's like when you're processing film, there's a stage where you're supposed to put bleach in. I don't know about most of this stuff, but you're supposed to put bleach in, and that kind of gives it a normal thing. If you skip the bleach, so you bypass the bleach stage, you end up with those sort of bluish, washed out. It shows up in a lot of things. It shows up in a lot of sort of 90s and on. Tony Scott does it a lot, that kind of visual palette. And so we thought that would be something that we could use to differentiate the past. And we were also very attuned to it and hoping that it would play, because we had thought originally that maybe a way to sort of establish, oh, okay, we're in the past, and okay, we're in the present, was possibly that we could do a beard for Mike, that maybe he had some facial hair, but it just turned out that the adhesive wasn't going to work. Jonathan was kind of allergic to the adhesive, so he couldn't handle it. So we couldn't put a beard on him, and so we had
couldn't just grow one.
And he could, well, yes, exactly. You can't just grow one, because then you have to sort of time out, when is he going to have time to grow the beard? When are you going to shave it in production? When are we going to produce things? So yeah, changing facial hair and changing hair in general during production, that's just like, it's a nightmare. It's more complicated than it seems. It was that for, I think, for Bryan Cranston in through some of those flash forwards in Breaking Bad as well. We had to put beards on top of like goatees, and you can't really, like, it wasn't a matter of just putting beard to here. It was like, no, we have to put a beard prosthetic over the whole thing and figure out a way that it doesn't look ridiculous. And we have a fantastic hair and makeup team, but like it's not pretty sometimes. So yeah, so we worked. We did definitely know that we were going to try and figure out a look for the flashbacks, something that sort of distinguished them in time, so that we could do that. We had done one flashback earlier in the season, I think episode 3, if I remember correctly. But we were a little worried, honestly. We were a little worried that, like, is the look going to be enough to distinguish it? So.
But then I think also you have an audience who is well versed in timelines and can keep up.
Yes, which I think we can all thank Lost a little bit for that, because they've done it. There are some shows that have certainly trailblazed, and Breaking Bad for that matter, but like there's certainly a lot of shows that have sort of gotten people more used to playing around in time than maybe it was in the case in the past.
You didn't want to use the Lost.
Yeah. Exactly.
So tell us about Emmy nomination day. What was that like?
It was weird. It was real weird. It was very surreal. I just kind of was like, it was an incredible honor, obviously, but it was also kind of like.
And who told you?
I found out basically when I went to work, because I was driving in and I didn't want to look at it, and I kind of, so I found out from one of our. She's currently Vince's assistant and an associate producer, Jen Carroll. So she's like, "Hey," I'm like, "Okay, fuck." Because it's just really overwhelming, and it was like, oh, this is in a certain way. I know I keep saying hit by lightning, lucky, and it's a little bit spooky in a certain way to be like, okay. People are acknowledging this work, which I'm proud of, but I'm also kind of like, oh, does this mean I'm gonna get hit by a bus or something? Like, something's got to balance out, right? And so that was my feeling about it. It was great. It was obviously very great, and people were calling and just, did you know this? I'm like, yeah, I know, I heard. So yeah, it was weird.
Very well deserved. I'm going to check the time and see. Yeah, I guess we can open the floor to questions. Mike's coming around. Oh, there are a couple down here in the front. A whole bunch down in the front. Everybody in the front wants to ask a question.
Yeah.
So you got the Emmy nomination for 5-0 and was nominated for editing and for supporting actor. And then for the second season, you did the episode Gloves Off, which had the same director, was a big episode for Mike. So can you tell me about like trying to recreate the feeling of this episode, or was that your intention?
No, I mean, it was not really our intention to recreate. Again, it's kind of happenstance what we get when we're breaking it. We're because we don't break out a season and then know where we're at. It's like, okay, this is what's happening now. This feels like the next thing. So for Gloves Off, when we got to it, it was kind of like, okay, well, we knew that we were teed up. We were teed up from the last episode to know that like Nacho had come to Mike and said, I want to kill somebody, and it was more like figuring out the details of it. We knew that we needed something of that more often than trying to figure out a plot thing. Where we sort of our plots tend to be things where we're like, okay, where is this character's head at? Where is this character morally at this point? Is Mike the kind of guy who, if someone came to him and said, I'll give you $50,000, kill someone, would he take that job? And we thought no. And so we needed to figure out a story that would show why not and what he would do to not go through it. So that was sort of what we did. We're like, okay, we don't think he's that guy. We don't think just because we've seen him kill these two cops who killed his son, he's the kind of guy who, as we see in the future, will hit, cartel members or will do all of these kind of dark things. So we wanted to kind of test where he was, and that was kind of our test essentially for it. And we do that with. I think that happens for all the characters in the show. We're just like, all right, is this character? It's a series of questions. Like, oh well, is Jimmy willing to do blank to Chuck, his brother? If he is, then cool. But if he's not, I want to know. And if so, what would tell us that? Would he steal from him? Would he go into his house and transpose numbers? Again, spoilers. Would he do these things? And those generate a lot of our sort of storylines. Is just asking those questions. Hi.
So I'm actually a composer.
Cool.
And I came here to learn about how a writer approaches storytelling and how that could help me. And you kind of already addressed this, but each individual episode has a dramatic arc, and then each season has a dramatic arc, and then the whole show has a dramatic arc. And I was quite surprised to hear how you work so much on each episode and not much seasonally. So I wanted to ask how you and the writers or whoever's involved, what part of your process or what is it that helps you or allows you to keep the dramatic cohesiveness throughout the whole,
Oh, that's a good question. If I understand the question.
I know it's a bit...
No, but I think I'm sure if you ask other writers in the room, you'd get a different answer. But the way I think about it, the process, is that we kind of work backwards rather than working forwards, rather than saying, all right, look, we've come up with an arc, and now, okay, if we want to be here by episode 7, then we need to be here by episode 4. We go, okay, here we are in episode 4. What did we do? What have we done? We'll just sort of ask the question, is there anything that we missed is there anything outstanding? Are there any things back there that we can use for this question? Is there something, just anything really? Like, is there some character? Is there some piece of information? One of the things that impacted Breaking Bad quite a bit was the relationship between Gus Fring and Hector Salamanca, or Tio. And one of the things that sort of spurred that relationship in season 4 was they were like, God, we see those two characters and they meet at a meeting out at the chicken farm, and Gus and Hector kind of really don't like each other. It was just a matter of looks, like we're just looking at what had happened there. And it's like, maybe there's a backstory there. Maybe there's some history there that we don't know about. Like it was really just based on the fact that when they were in the same space, you could see them kind of hating each other. And so asking that question and asking what might have happened between them to make them hate each other led to a lot, led to the kind of end of season 4, the stuff that plays out with Gus. So I think, to me at least, it's asking, is there something that we missed? Is there something in the past here? Is there some other piece that we forgot or not necessarily forgot, but just like haven't explored that we can? And so that makes it feel, it's cheating really, but it makes it feel like things have been planted, like, see, they planted this to pay it off here. But really it's more like observing what happened in the past so that we can say, oh yeah, no, that was what happened in the past, so obviously this is what's going to happen now. So I think that's what we try to do when we can, to sort of make things feel like there's an arc that was planned.
So it's like you find the other parts of the drama in what you've already written and what, yeah.
Yeah,
so
it's sort of saying,
out of what you've already done.
Yeah, exactly.
All right, thank you so much. That was really helpful.
You have a question here? First, I just want to say, you made me totally fall in love with and care about a character who never even shows up on screen.
Oh.
Like, I totally, my son, like, I totally believe he's real. Everyone's relationship with him is so real. It's just fantastic.
Thank you.
And we never see him. My question is a general writing question about writing for a network that has constraints versus, so many platforms now like Netflix or HBO, any language, any amount of sex, any amount of violence. And yet, like on your network, the quality is so great. So can you talk about writing within constraints a little bit?
Sure. We were talking about this earlier, actually. I think sometimes having constraints is actually really helpful. I think about, like, this is nerdy, but whatever. I think about like sonnets. Like you some of the greatest literature in the Western canon is in sonnets. Some of the great poetry, because you have to hit a precise form, and that allows that in some ways constrains you, but in other ways it makes you have to say, okay, what can I do? I can't do this. I can't do this. I think actually in general, no matter what, all of this work, whether you're working on HBO or Netflix or AMC, everything in the end comes down to money and time. I know some people who have worked on some big HBO shows, and they're like, my God, we're running for our lives to make this work. So everybody's going to be working within those constraints, and I think hopefully they allow you the chance to be creative, to be like, okay, I can't do this. Like with when we ran out of a beard for Mike, and so we were like, okay, is there anything else? Is there any, one of the things that we did to make the time pass, or to make that time passage, because we didn't want to trust the treatment. We didn't want to trust the bleach bypass. So we're like, okay, is there a way that maybe Philadelphia has snow? And so, we didn't shoot in Philadelphia. We shot in Albuquerque, and we had to have our greens department and our production design crew put snow in, and we had to figure out angles to sort of constrain that. So, because we felt like that would tell us, oh, that's a different place and a different time. We don't see snow in Albuquerque, despite the fact that it snows in Albuquerque. But in our show, it does not. So we had to figure that out for this particular episode.
I love in the script too where you're like, production note, which always, if you're a writer, when you say production note, is like, line producer, please don't lose your shit.
Yes.
This is not going to cost a fortune.
Right.
You're like, production note, this is Philly, but it's not really Philly.
Right, yes. We don't need to be perfect, but we need to get it within the ballpark. We need to, and we did, and we had to look through, and it was also, again, the weather we were dealing with. Oddly enough, we got rained out of our snow scenes. So we had snow set up, and we had that whole street kind of snowed over and whatever. And then we had incredible lightning storms that pretty much blew our day, so we couldn't shoot because it washed away all of our snow. But yeah, so those kinds of things, those constraints, I think, can help come up with things. And I actually really like the snow there, and I even like the fact that it's raining allows for what appears to be sort of melt off in the episode. There's some dripping, and our sound design team did a great job of like accentuating that. But that's actually just, it had rained. It's not melt off, but like it looks like it and it feels like it. And so if you don't know, you just kind of feel the snow and the kind of melting realness of it.
I got a question.
Hello.
So far, the Better Call Saul has been Saul's story,
Yes.
sort of disconnected from Breaking Bad. How intertwined or disconnected do you plan to take the show with Breaking Bad?
That's a really good question. We're not sure. We would like there to be something that feels that allows us to bring them together. But the question of whether we're going to do sort of a, Rosencrantz and Guildenstern are dead kind of show where we see what Saul was doing behind the scenes of Breaking Bad, we haven't really answered. I think it would be nice to have to drive a golden spike, as it were, and say and bring them together in some way. But we honestly haven't figured out exactly how much crossover that there's going to be. I know that sometimes people are like, "Oh, it's going to be great! Like, you guys could put Walter White in." Okay, we could, but when you actually sort of ask that question, then it's like, would you guys be happy if you just saw Walter White walking through a grocery store behind our main characters? Because we know from Breaking Bad, Walt has no connection to Saul. He has no relationship with Mike. He has no connection to sort of the main characters. So to see him would just be to see him, or to, unless there's some other thing that we haven't necessarily thought of, and believe me, we've tried. So if it comes out that we come up with something that we're like, yes, that's a way to do it, then I think we would. But otherwise, I think we're more like trying to figure out what Jimmy McGill's transformation into Saul looks like, and then how much we need to see of that transformation and where it overlaps with the sort of Breaking Bad narrative. So it's an ongoing question. I wish I had a better answer for you.
Okay. Hello?
We're down
You're
in the
good.
front.
You're good.
Oh, okay, good. Gordon, I think I'm more interested about you being the writer. My question is talking about constraints. When you started becoming a writer, what was the most challenging part about writing in terms of the process, and how did you manage to overcome those challenges?
Like the transition from being an assistant to being a writer, or just
that, and also sitting down and writing?
Yeah, sitting down and writing is awful. I'm sorry. I mean, all the writers out there, I'm sure, feel the same. It's just really awful. I think it's Robert Haas, the poet, who said, like, the best feeling is having written and everything else is awful. And Vince will say that sometimes too, and I think it's true. I have had to come up with a series of tricks, like full-on tricks, like to get myself going, because sort of facing the blank page is just like, I will do almost anything else. I will play Bejeweled until my fingers are numb. I'm just like, I can't. So I have a sort of process that I've gotten into as I've gotten further into this, where it's like, okay, I'm not really writing. All I'm doing right now is I'm going through the, we have pages and pages of room notes. I'm just going through the notes. That's all I'm doing. I'm just going through the notes, and I'm writing down what I have. Okay, that's it. I'm not writing at all. And then the next step is like, okay, well, we have the cars. I'm I'm just putting the cards into the outline. I'm not writing. I'm just taking what we already did and I'm putting them in the outline. Okay, great. I'm just gonna temp in some dialogue. I'm not writing. It's a series of not writing that I do, so that eventually there's something that I'm revising, and even then I'm just like, oh, I'm just revising this. I'm not. I had the dialogue temped in of like, that's the worst possible version of the dialogue. And then I'm just revising it. I'm just fixing it. So I kind of go through everything in a series. I go through all, both like the outline and everything is in a series of loops where I can pretend that I'm not doing any of it. And then finally I'm like, oh, I just have to turn in. It's fine. It's done. I'm done. I guess I'm done. It's fine. So that's what my strategy.
Song playlist or like a Pomodoro technique or anything like that?
I don't know what Pomodoro. What's a Pomodoro?
That is.
It's probably a good one.
It's a half-hour time thing. 25 minutes of dedicated
Oh.
writing, 5 minutes of break.
I do that. I didn't know what that was called, but I do that. And I also have. I don't think I can't write without music playing.
Is it the same playlist?
No,
Do you have like
not
a Better Call Saul? Like,
No.
here's my.
It's just whatever it's just it's whatever I'm currently listening to, or it's whatever I happen to be listening to when I start writing, and I'll probably fixate on it and just listen like over and over and over and over and over to something. Yeah. So like currently it's like it's a Bon Iver playlist. It's just,
I'm huge on Holocene. I could just put that
I'm
on.
just listening to over and over. So yeah. So tricks. That's what I trick myself to pretend that I'm not doing it.
I also put freezer pop, like freezer strudels.
Yeah.
I'm a food motivated writer.
See, no, that's a good.
At
That
the
is
end
good.
of Act
Yeah.
One, I'm getting a freezer
Yeah,
strudel.
that's a good. That is good too. Yeah, some reward systems where you're like, all right, I'm not.
Pavlovian writing.
Yeah, purely Pavlov. We are animals. So yeah, that's a great one.
Hi, Gordon. Thanks for
Hi.
coming tonight.
No, thank you for having me.
I just have a question that a lot of writers would feel uncomfortable answering. But
Good.
I just want to know the answer so that I can go through, so I can get past my own writing block.
Sure.
My question is, do you have any regrets with the scripts you've written and that were produced? Did you ever have any moments where you thought, oh, I wish I could have taken this story into a different direction instead of seeing what I'm seeing right now on screen? Did you ever?
Yeah.
But it was just too late. Ever have any regrets like those?
Yeah, regrets. I will say one of the things that I think is great about TV writing, and tell me if you agree, but what I really like is the fact that you're working. It's less solitary than just like I'm going off and writing a film a lot of the time, because you're in a room, and so you're talking to people, and you have that access to be like, what do you guys think?
I don't remember who quoted the like. I'm just gonna attribute it to someone, but it was like the difference between a TV writer's room and a film writer is in a TV situation, if you have a problem, you walk down the hall and you turn to a co-worker and you're like, how do I solve this? If you're a film writer, you walk down the hall and you throw yourself out the window.
Yes. So because of that, I think a lot of those regrets, like on the story level, it's less so things where I'm like, because you have the chance to talk it through. You have the chance to be like, but I think also for anybody, get yourself a group of people. If you're not in a room, get yourself a group of people that you trust, that you can talk to about things. It's horribly painful. It's the next most painful thing to writing is having people read you and tell you what they think. But it's really helpful because, your skin gets a little tougher and you get to sort of be like, you get to be a little less attached to any individual word. But having that and having people that you can bounce things off of, for me means that when I see things on screen, it's been worked through by, like, it's not just like I pitched something and it went. It's like somebody else had to hear that pitch. Somebody else had to read that once it went onto the page and go, yeah, okay, we'll do that. There are still though, yes, there are things where I'm like, oh, yeah, I wish there was another way we could have come up. I wish there was some other something. Like it's hard to find a specific, but like there's of course things that I'm like, there even more than that. It's like things where I'm like, there are bits that like I really like, and like I've seen them play for audiences or people, and they don't respond to them the way that I did. Like there's certain jokes that like I've seen episodes play and like people don't laugh, and I'm like, no. You know what I mean? Like there's a joke. Whatever. There's a joke in my second episode, which is 108. Where Jimmy's saying how he passed the bar on his third try, and he's like, yeah, it's like losing your virginity, third time's the charm. And I just thought and it's just a toss-off joke that he throws in, and his brother doesn't really respond to it. And I found it funny, but like it's never gotten a response. Like every time I've seen it, like where people are watching it when we're in like spotting or whatever, it's just like, oh yeah, that's a line that happened. Like, so there's things like that where certainly I'm like, I guess that joke's just funny to me, but like. But you try and roll off of it and be like, all right, there's another joke to come. That's the thing I do is I'm like, when you ask like how do you, or what overcoming that regret is I think hoping to be like, okay, maybe virginity jokes aren't as funny to other people as they are to me, so I'll move on and I'll try and come up with something better next time.
Thank you.
Everyone's making, there it is. This is a pretty general question, but is there any advice that you'd give to early writers just to stay motivated and to just find a way to keep getting better?
Yeah, I mean, okay, for writing specifically, not necessarily becoming a writer. Those, because they are different things, as we were talking about. Like, for becoming a writer, I would say keep at it. Be willing to do different things. Be willing to be exposed to different things, both in life and like other jobs and other film experience. It does help, because even if you like eventually you want to get into a room, and if your experience is just like I've watched a lot of movies, you're going to be less useful. You want to be able to connect to the stuff that's most human in you and most life in you that you can. So keep working, keep doing things, even if doesn't seem directly related. Eventually, hopefully, it will be. For writing, personally, this is just me. I think read things, read scripts, read books, read things that make you feel jealous. Like, oh, damn it, that's a really cool way of doing that. I do like. People that I work with all the time come up with things that I'm like, oh, that's such a smart way of doing that. I have to remember to do that in the future, like economical ways of getting through things or whatever. But even just reading good writing, reading things that challenge you, that are a step beyond where you are, I think, I don't know, I think it's really helpful to know, to set your sights higher, to be like, all right, there's something beyond where I'm at. There's something good there. And then you can learn those lessons. You can kind of try and practice them. You can experiment with them. You can be liberated by, read things that challenge you specifically. Like, I know we're in a culture, I think, that unfortunately a lot of times is just like, encourages you to seek out the things that you already like, because of how social media functions. But like, if you can try and push yourself a little bit.
Hi, Gordon.
Hi.
Congratulations, it's a wonderful episode.
Thank you.
I'm in the enviable position of actually having seen it for the first time tonight, so
cool.
It really blew me away. My wife and I are also in the enviable position of just catching up with Saul right now. So we're in season 1, we're working our way through. I'm not sure if we've skipped an episode before this, but it might even be right in the order.
Oh, cool.
But it is amazing what you've done there. My question is, how do you get the voice for someone like Mike? You obviously know him from the work in Breaking Bad, and you know what that character does, but how easy is that for you to hear that voice in your head so clearly you know how he's going to deliver a line, especially a character who chooses his words so carefully?
That's a good question. I'm not sure I'll have a good answer for it, but I think in general with all of the characters, I mean, I will read it out loud to myself. You know, I'll try and sort of test. Mike actually, in a weird way, because he talks so little, it's a little bit easier because it's like, is he going to say that much? Nope, done. Just there's a scythe that I can just slash through things with. You know. With more other characters. With Jimmy, it's a little bit harder because he's super colorful and he can go through flights of fancy, but sometimes you don't want them, but sometimes you do. And so finding that balance of like, well, when does Jimmy get to be funny is trickier. So I think, I don't know, I think I tend to actually like, I'll write them and I'll just kind of try and get the sense of what should be said, and then I'll try and go for voice and be like, what's the smallest number of words I can use here to get this across, and that requires me reading it to myself, or at least moving my lips as if I'm reading, because it just sort of, I don't know if it triggers that like auditory part of my brain. I don't know. Do you have a different process for getting your voices, or do you?
Oh my gosh, I just go into a fugue state, and it's like I come out the other side going, elves came in the night and wrote it.
So elves. I think if you don't know any elves, find some elves.
This is the hardest part of moderating this. We have time for 2 more questions.
Give the back some love.
Microphones making their way around. There's this like group in the middle here who aren't able to get microphones, but we're here.
So listening to you tonight, it sounds like a lot of the writing process is very improvised and intuitive, and yet at the same time watching the show, and we're big fans of the show, we've seen every episode, it's pretty clear that you're not just making it up as you go along. So how do you decide what is sort of part of the larger structure and what you can improvise? Because it seems to me you'd have to keep those things clear to a certain extent.
I mean, when you say improvise, do you mean like on set, like in the moment, or do you mean like?
No, I mean the whole process, like just from the get-go.
I mean, it's loose, but it's both is loose and it isn't loose. We don't necessarily write towards sort of an arc that we've planned out for a season, but we do the opposite. So I think some people or some shows sometimes spend more time figuring out those benchmarks, which we don't do as much. I mean, we do it, but we don't do it in detail in the same way. So we spend our time doing the detail work in the episodes. So when we get into episode 1, all the episodes that are after that go away. Like we're not like, well, if we do this in this episode, then we have to worry about what's happening in the next episode. It's just gone. It's functionally a non-existent thing, but we're really focused on episode 1, and then when episode 1 is done, we're like, all right, well, what comes next? So it's improvised in the moment, in the sense that when we're pitching, we're like trying to throw whatever we can at the wall. But I think that's every room, everywhere. You know, you're trying to figure out like, all right, well, what can we do? What are the bounds here? And then it's a teacher of mine once said that it's basically you write from the gut and you revise from the head. And so that improvising part is you just being like, wow, God, wouldn't it be great if this happened? Wouldn't it be great if, Chuck threw a javelin through Jimmy? That'd be fun, right? And we're like, yeah, cool, that would be cool. When we think about it, and it's like, yeah, probably not. And then that's that kind of like, so I mean, it is a little Freudian in the sense it's like, okay, we try and engage our ids, and then our egos come in, and then in the end the showrunner super ego comes in and is like, no, we're gonna do this. So I think that's our structure. That's the way that works for us.
Thank you.
Oh, okay, so this is our last question, because I'm getting the wave down.
I'm right here.
Excellent.
I don't know much about TV writing. I'm wondering about the process in the room when you pitch ideas to each other, like when you're writing those cards that you were talking about. Do any of you get really attached? Like, how do you get, you know, I'm going to write this one, or like, how do you distribute the episodes?
We work. There are places I know, or that I've heard of. I don't know if you've worked this way, but there's places that I know that will do like a character will be basically like a writer.
Yeah,
will
like
work.
I think Heroes did that.
Yeah, they're
where they divvied it up by character.
Yeah, and so someone will be sort of more attached to a person or a storyline or something like that, and there'll be people that kind of, you know. I know on like X-Files in the past, that's like, you know, there were a group of people that did the mythology episodes, and then there were people that did more of the standalone episodes. We don't really divide the work that way. It's strictly where you are in the batting order, and we don't know it even really until it's our episode, because the showrunners are like they have more concerns and like trying to work out what director we're going to get and when people are going to be going to Albuquerque, and you know, we have some writers who direct as well, so that impacts their schedule and when they'll be in the room. So if they'll be out of the room, then they can't be writing that episode if they're going to be out of the room directing a different episode. So for us, it's the divvying up of the work is like, okay, we're done with that episode. Now it's your episode. And so you kind of go into it going, okay, all right, I guess this is what I'm doing. You can, I mean, there is sort of a, you know, there's a little bit of a hierarchy that's based on seniority in the room. That's like, you know, if you've been there a little longer, then probably you're going to be higher up, and that may mean you get more episodes, or it may mean that you come at a different point in the batting order. So
Showrunner is usually going to do the first and the last,
right,
and maybe one in the middle, and then it's kind of batting order, but it's also sort of like around people's personal schedules a little bit too. And sometimes also you may have a episode that's going to be about something that's in somebody's wheelhouse more so than another writer. So it's like they may not be you may bounce somebody into something that's more in their wheelhouse. But in Canada, at least at the start of a season, for like when I was show running Bitten, we would contract writers per number of episodes. So I would know, okay, I'm 3, that person is 2. In a 10 episode season, that person is 1.5. So then I could kind of, you know, put people in an order. Yeah.
Yeah, so I think some of it is like, you just kind of, mostly it's hierarchical, and it's based on a lot of things that the showrunners kind of get to decide of, like, all right, well, we're gonna work with you to get this in order.
But you had 2 back to back, and like almost back to back, and that must have been a tough writing schedule.
I was writing the second one while I was on the set for the first one. Yeah.
Yeah, like you're on outline and script at the same time.
Because the prep, the way that, at least for us, it was like the schedule works out so that it's like while episode 6 is shooting, episode 7 is prepping. So that the moment episode 6 is done shooting, episode 7 starts shooting, which means that the moment episode 6 stops shooting, episode 8 starts prepping.
And
so
you
I
wrote
had 6
episode
and
8.
8 for the first season. So while episode 6 was shooting, I had to finish episode 8. It was how that broke out, and that was actually sort of a case where it was a 2-part thing, because it was supposed to be co-written between myself and another writer, but because of how long it took us to break the episode, which it took forever to break the episode, it meant that he was going to be on set when when it needed to be like finished breaking, essentially. So it ended up falling to me, and also it had a bunch of legal junk, which I've sort of ended up being, because my sister and my mother have ended up being kind of our de facto legal advisors for a lot of things, because they're both lawyers. So it fell to me for a lot of reasons. But yeah, it was a little bit it was a little bit harrying to kind
Trial
of
by
get
fire.
that. Yes, they're like, let's see if you break. Let's see what happens. So,
Thank you so much.
thank you, everybody.